This meeting to order. Good afternoon, everyone. Bienvenue à la 10e réunion du comité.
Welcome to the 10th meeting of our Standing Committee
On the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. To ensure an orderly meeting, I'd like to outline a few rules. First of all, members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice or Inuktitut. Veuillez considérer, bien sûr, les exigences du Bureau de Régie.
We have to, of course, respect the Board of Internal Economy's rules for public safety, sanitary controls.
As you by name, nous vous rappelons que toutes vos questions.
We'll remind you that all your comments should be addressed through the chair.
Please speak slowly and clearly, and when you're not speaking, please mute your microphone. So pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, we are considering the main estimates today. Joining us for the first hour is Minister Haidu of Indigenous Services Canada and her department officials. In the second hour, we will hear from Ministers Miller of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada and Minister Vandal from Northern Affairs and their respective department officials. Honourable Minister Haidu, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can't say how happy I am to be here in real life, to see you all in person. It's my first committee appearance not on Zoom in well over 2.5 years. So it's great to see you in real life. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today. I, too, obviously, am on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin people, but I come from the Robinson Superior Treaty area, from the traditional territory of Fort William First Nation on the tip of Lake Superior. So I'm blessed to live and play there. I'm here today, of course, to discuss supplementary estimates 2021-22, supplementary estimates C, and the main estimates for 22-23 for Indigenous Services Canada. I have Deputy Minister Christian Fox here, and of course, Chief Financial Officer Philippe, sorry. Nice to be able to point to people. This past week, we observed International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, World Water Day, and World Tuberculosis Day. And each of these days serve as a stark reminder of the impacts of colonization, historic inequities, and trauma that have had and continue to have such a significant impact on First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities across the country. The work of decolonization and self-determination needs our steady and unwavering commitment, a clear focus in equity funding and opportunity, and a shared vision of a healthy future for everyone in this country. The Prime Minister has been very clear that working towards reconciliation requires the commitment of all cabinet ministers. So together with my colleagues, First Nations, Inuit and Métis partners and the public service, we are working to change our processes to better support Indigenous self-determination and the well-being and economic prosperity of all Indigenous peoples in Canada. This commitment to a process of reconciliation will help bring justice, respect and dignity for Indigenous peoples, but it's not just good for Indigenous peoples, it's good for all of us as a country and for all Canadians. Since 2016, we've invested over $6.5 billion on infrastructure projects that include projects in housing, water, education, and community. The funding provided through these supplementary and main estimates is a movement towards reconciliation, and these investments, I see them as a down payment on the work that we have left to do. The 2021-22 supplementary estimate C contains $648.6 million in new funding that will be dedicated to emergency response and recovery activities, the continued implementation of Jordan's Principle, Indigenous trauma-informed health and cultural supports, and medical transport in Nunavut. For 22-23, the department's main estimates are $39.6 billion. This is a net increase of about $26.1 billion, or 193%, compared to last year's main estimates. Lorsque nous examinons les augmentations.
Well, we examined the increases for the budgets this year. Many of these are related to family and children's affairs. These budgetary expenses will be aimed at youth, Indigenous youth, and at the heart of what we want to do. We will continue to improve their well-being, their education, and their standard of living. This is an essential part of our journey towards reconciliation.
Can reverse the harms that First Nations children have experienced or return the years of lost love, really, family that was suffered through the separation from families, communities, and culture. Historic injustices do require historic reparations, and our shared goal is to achieve a settlement that can be delivered to families as soon as possible. The fall economic and fiscal update committed to providing $40 billion to provide compensation for those harmed by the federal government's discriminatory funding practices and to commit the funds necessary to implement long-term reform so that future generations of First Nations children will never face the same systemic tragedies. This year's budgetary spending includes half of the funds to begin to address these historic wrongs. As mentioned, budgetary spending has increased by $26.1 billion, or 193%, as compared to the 2021-22 main estimates as a result. The major changes include an increase of $20 billion for the agreements in principle that has been reached for compensation. These funds honor our commitment for compensation that's comprehensive, that's fair and equitable, and that will help provide some healing for those impacted by the historic inequities in First Nations child welfare. We are working with all of the parties to put into place an approach that will best serve affected children and their families. And I do want to take a moment to thank all of the parties and Honourable Murray Sinclair and his team for their incredible work, their shared commitment to this process as they continue to work tirelessly on reaching a final agreement. We've also committed to significant investments to address long-term reform for First Nations Child and Family Services that will be sought in future supplementary estimates. There's an additional increase of $646.8 million for First Nations Child and Family Services and the continued implementation of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal's orders. This funding supports the implementation of the Act respecting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children, youth, and families, which ensures that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children and families have jurisdiction over their child and family services. Indeed, it's on the principle that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people can decide what is best for their children, their families, and their communities. As I mentioned earlier, this week we marked World Water Day. I remain deeply committed to ensuring that First Nations on reserve have access to safe and clean drinking water. This year's budgetary spending includes an increase of $2 billion for an out-of-court settlement to again compensate First Nations people for their discriminatory lack of clean water access. There's also a net increase of $1.2 billion in this year's budgetary spending for infrastructure to make improvements in the access to safe, clean drinking water on reserve. Communities have worked hard to improve water infrastructure by repairing, expanding, and replacing infrastructure, strengthening training and support of water operators, and allocating additional funding for operations and maintenance. First Nations communities and leaders have been clear. They need long-term support for water and wastewater operations and maintenance to prevent future advisories. And that's why Canada is now covering 100% of the funding formula used to calculate these costs, up from 80%. One challenge with lifting long-term drinking water advisories is that it's not just about repairing or replacing infrastructure. It is about running and maintaining the system after an advisory has been lifted.
Minister, I'll ask you to wrap up.
Okay, I have so much more to say. So, but we'll get to it in questions. I'll just say that the increased funding in water, Mr. Chair, will support First Nations to improve water operator salaries, retain qualified operators, train new operators, improve or maintain asset condition ratings, and ensure longer lifestyle cycles for water assets. We, of course, have an increase in spending in healthcare, in education, and, of course, infrastructure, as we know that the deficits are large, Mr. Chair. But I will just repeat this and end here. First Nations leaders and members do know best what their communities need. And so we are committed to supporting First Nations to independently deliver services. We're working with communities to help them prepare for the transfer of service delivery, taking a holistic, community-based approach. Thank you very much, members of the committee, and I'm looking forward to your questions. This is a very important conversation.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. On va procéder.
Thank you, Madam Minister. We're going to go with our first round. Mr. Schmale, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues. Unfortunately, I can't join you in in person, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak with the minister about the issues that she mentioned just a few seconds ago in her speech. Minister, let's start with the infrastructure because you kind of ended on that tone. I'd like to look at the estimates that are showing the amount of spending that is going towards maintenance of community infrastructure and construction, that sort of thing. Can you tell the committee specifically what percentage of those funds are going to new infrastructure as opposed to maintenance of existing infrastructure?
Well, thank you very much, MP Schmale. And I will just say that it was disappointing to see your party vote against the estimates last night because, in fact, this is what we need. We need to actually continue our investments in First Nations capacity. But I will turn to Philippe to speak a little bit about your question and the percentages.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. So we see an increase in the funding for infrastructure this fiscal year. It's up to $1.2 billion. So we have received funding through the budget 2021. The difference between what makes the 1.2 is we have a net increase of 1.1 billion that makes for shovel-ready projects, but also operation and maintenance. There's a little reduction in water funding. That comes from the sunsetting of the budget 2016 budget. With regard to the exact proportion, I know that my colleague from regional operation is on the line as well. So I don't know if we have that exact proportion of what is dedicated to new infrastructure versus the maintenance, the operation of existing one. So I'll turn to Joanne Wilkinson. And if we don't have the answer, we can always provide that detail in writing.
Right, thank you. As quick as possible, please. I only have so much time.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. We will follow up in writing. I don't have the specific breakdown with us today. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. That's a very quick answer. Thank you. In terms of boil water advisories, how many are existing at this exact moment on reserve?
And thank you very much for the question. We've lifted 131 boil water advisories since we were elected in 2015. There's 34 left. There are a number that are very close to being lifted, and we're very excited to be able to announce those in the months to come.
I'm just curious, out of those 131 that have been lifted, and this goes to my first question, how many have come back online as new boil water advisories coming back?
It's a good question. There are some short-term boil water advisories that do result in long-term, and I'm not sure about the interplay between the new infrastructure and the new water treatment plants, but perhaps, Mr. Thompson, you have that answer?
On the, of course, this is a fluid situation. There are always pressures on water system. Again, I will turn to my colleague Joanne from Regional Operations if she has more information with regard to advisories.
Thank you for the question. So certainly a part of the goal in terms of reducing the number of long-term drinking water advisories has been preventing those short-term advisories, those between 2 and 12 months, from becoming long-term. And so in that space, we've also ensured 211 short-term drinking water advisories having been lifted. In terms of the new construction, though, we'll include that in the breakdown that we get to from your first question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Minister, out of the boil water advisories have been lifted, and I know you mentioned 131. Your party did promise in the 2015 election to have them all lifted by 2019. What continues to be the roadblocks in getting them fixed? I think everyone would agree at this table, I'm sure, that if this were any other municipality or any other place, this would be done already.
Well, thank you. Again, we inherited 131 from the Harper Conservatives. So I'm not at all defending that there's 34 left, but I will just say that it's important that we realize where we were starting from. And I will say that for the remaining 34, there are a number that we think will be lifted shortly. There are some that are very challenging, and it has to do with a complex interplay between the geography of the community, the kinds of underlying infrastructure to deliver that water to homes, the sometimes access to land that's appropriate to build those facilities. Each boil water advisory is listed online on the Indigenous Services Canada webpage with a very detailed outline of where the community is at in terms of the process to lift those water advisories. And I will say that communities are working incredibly hard with Indigenous Services Canada. It's not a lack of money. Sometimes there are barriers in place that require multiple steps prior to the infrastructure being installed and working efficiently.
And why did your party promise to end them by 2019 if you knew the problem was that big?
Well, I think it was a commitment by the Prime Minister that everybody in this country deserves clean drinking water. And of course, there are
we all
some.
agreed, but you promised.
And we're going to honor that promise, sir. We are continuing to work on that.
A couple of years late.
Again, imagine how further ahead we would have been had this work had been ongoing over the decade that the Conservative Party held power. I will just say this. We are committed to ending these long-term drinking water advisories. We work respectfully with communities. The money is in place. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has indicated the money is in place. We've closed the gap on operating and maintenance expenses. And so I have every confidence that we will be able to work with our partners to get this done.
Well, Minister, think of how much further ahead we'd be if the party in power actually kept their promise. On what date will all boiled water advisories be lifted?
Well, I think, again, we have a very clear outline for Canadians that are interested. And by the way, many Canadians are interested in this work with First Nations communities. It is online at the Indigenous Services Canada website. It's difficult to tell you an exact date because communities have different barriers. They have different realities and are different processes and places in the long-term lifts. But we are ambitious and we are working with our partners. As I said, I'm pleased by the Parliamentary Budget Officer's assessment of our ongoing commitment financially, and we're working with communities on many of those other structural barriers that are in the way.
Thank you, Mr. Schmale. Thank you, Mr. Schmale.
Thank you.
We'll go to the next person, Mr. Pawlowski. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Minister and staff. I wanted to ask about post-secondary education funding for Indigenous communities. I've been approached by Seven Generations, which is a post-secondary institution in Fort Francis. They've inquired as to whether more funding is available. They're certainly doing some really good and valuable work in northwestern Ontario. So perhaps somebody could tell me what, if any, funding opportunities there are for First Nations or Indigenous communities for post-secondary education. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I've spoken with that group of people who are so passionate about post-secondary education, indeed unlocking generations of poverty, and I completely agree. By coincidence, I'm a first-gen post-secondary graduate myself, and certainly have seen the impact that's had on my own children. So I'm going to turn to Deputy Fox because she's been doing some good work in this area.
So just in terms of post-secondary institutions, at the time, Indigenous-led post-secondary institutions, right now we tend to have a lot of our programming that's based on a program of the institution itself. So whether it's a economic development, business program, nursing program. But I think what we're hearing from post-secondary institutions is a desire for that core funding. So we are looking at how can the department better support versus program by program in order to give that long-term support.
Very much. Question number 2. Webequay and Martin Falls have asked for funding for a permanent road so those communities can access the rest of the world other than by flying or by ice roads. I know the province, I think, has agreed to some funding. Where are we in terms of funding? And having said that, I realize that may not be your ministry. It may be other ministries.
You're absolutely right, MP. There's a strong provincial lead in the space of provincial roadways. And so the province of Ontario has not indicated yet, to my knowledge, to our department that they need additional supports. They may be working with the Minister of Infrastructure. We'll check into that and get back to you. But the province of Ontario would be largely the party responsible to support the development of those roads.
Thank you. And the third question is, I'm not sure if you were, no, that was before your time. It was during the last session. This committee had a study looking at the enforcement of various laws in Indigenous communities. And certainly that seemed to be a big problem, lack of enforcement. And I was very pleased to read quite recently that we'd started a consultation process looking at First Nation police services legislation. I think that is being led by Public Safety and Minister Mendicino, but perhaps you could tell me a little bit more as to what our aims are and when we expect that to be done.
Well, thank you for the question. And it is one of the issues that comes up when I visit communities as a priority for communities that don't have any policing or enforcement or have little policing or enforcement. But even if communities do, there has been a historic clash, if I can say it strongly enough, between Indigenous communities and sometimes police forces. You and I are from Thunder Bay, and we're in the middle of such a clash that seems to have been ongoing for all the years I've been a politician and then some. That's why these consultations are exciting, because there have been pilot projects through through public safety to support the development of self-determined policing for Indigenous communities that are run by Indigenous communities and provided to Indigenous members, and they have shown great promise. And so these consultations is about the co-development of policing legislation that would enable even more communities to take part in setting up their own policing programs in their communities, or sometimes it might be in larger geographical regions through tribal councils or other kinds of Indigenous organizations. In terms of the timeline, I'm not sure I have the completion of the consultations.
So the consultations actually started last week, and there will be ongoing until probably May or June. And then there is, however, some funding available now for the expansion of some of the existing policing agreements. And in addition to that, we have a complementary piece at Indigenous Services Canada, which is the Pathways program, which is really aimed to be a bit of that prevention the prevention spending around safe transportation, peacekeepers, to kind of start developing that capacity and that talent base to then become part of that future policing, Indigenous-led policing force.
So we're actually contemplating having a national police force, something like the RCMP, that would be separate?
No, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be so national in scope, because, of course, each Indigenous community or region has a different reality, and in some cases, different customary codes. And so the idea is to enable First Nations communities or regions to have policing and safety programs that are specific to their own area, to their own cultural realities, using their own members. Many communities, for example, talk about the need for I don't even know if the right term is public safety officers, but people that are engaged with the community in a preventative way prior to needing enforcement in the most classic way that we might think about it. And those kinds of ideas are in some cases very historical for First Nations groups. It's about peacekeeping prior to having to enforce the law. So they would be very specific to each community or region. That's how we're anticipating it would unfold.
Merci, Monsieur Pawlowski. Madame Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Pawlowski. Ms. Gill, you have the floor for a few minutes. Thank you. I'd like to thank the Minister for her appearance here and her team. She said earlier, and I agree with her thoroughly, that the First Nations know what's best for them. During the course of our work in committee, we've met Lance Heyman, Chief and responsible in Quebec and Labrador. He was talking about housing shortages. This is their priority, and for many other First Nations in Quebec, we've also heard similar stories in other provinces and territories. They recognize their own needs. They can find strategies to solve those, and the government has set itself as an objective to overcome the shortage of housing between now and 2030. With the billions that were put together for the First Nations in Quebec, this covered only for the next 5 years. Not that it's been granted, but it should be granted. 3.9 billion. Even if we have it over 5 years, there's still a lot of opportunity cost there. We wouldn't be able to fulfill all the requirements. These are the 2018 figures. And of course, it's growing all the time. My question is straightforward. There's 3.9 billion. Will we see a portion of that in the current or the next upcoming budget? what was the government intending to do for short-term investment, where you're talking about getting it done by 2030? We need things right now. We need action. So what percentage of that might be able to be disbursed soon? Thank you.
And thanks for your passion for housing. I agree that it's a critical ingredient to anybody's success. And the stories I've heard across.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. McLeod.
Mr. Chairman, I have a hearing issue, and there's a significant difference between the volume on the interpreter versus what the minister's volume is. So I'm playing with this button on and off, and every time it switches, it's just about blowing what hearing I do have left out of my ears. So is there any way we could get that balanced so that I don't have to be switching back and forth?
So we'll just pause for a second and we'll see if we can answer your question.
As I turn it up, and just go blowing my eardrums.
Monsieur le Président.
Everyone, I can't remember. I think you were in the middle of an answer, Minister.
I was just beginning, and I do remember the question, which was l'inacceptabilité de la situation pour les autochtones.
The inacceptability of the situation for First Nations in Quebec.
Everywhere in this country, I do want to point out that MP Stubbs called it a humanitarian crisis the other day, and she's absolutely right. She's speaking about northern housing, but it's true all across this country. In fact, our national housing strategy now has affirmed the right to housing as a Canadian right, and so it's something that's very important to me personally. In terms of investments overall, in budgets 2017 and 18, we committed over $1.7 billion in housing for distinction-based housing strategies in Quebec. Since April 2016, there's been $88 million invested. There's 248 completed projects, 29 still ongoing. That's about 40 communities, about 56.
Je m'excuse, je sais que j'interromps souvent, on a tellement peu.
I know that I'm interrupting often. We have very little time, but we're talking about 2018-19, and my question is, what are we forecasting as a percentage because we have to construct more homes for the growing needs. So what's forecast now for the next tranche of this funding? We are evaluating that we'll get the job done by 2030, but what part is being invested now? We'll know how much we need more to get the job done by 2030.
Very much, and I think we're all waiting with bated breath for the budget, and certainly we know that as a government we must be more ambitious in our expenditures on affordable housing, in particular for First Nations, Inuit and Métis people, but certainly across the country there's a lack of affordable housing. So I know that this is the top of mind for the Prime Minister and for the Finance Minister, and I'll be working with my colleagues across portfolios, including Minister Husan, to accelerate our work and make, I think importantly, our processes as facile as possible for Indigenous people to be able to determine for themselves how they will build that housing, what it will look like, and how they will meet the needs of their growing communities.
Il me reste toujours du temps, Monsieur le Président.
Do I have time left? You have a minute left. I would like to know also what percentage is from your department for the modeling of the needs in housing, because we know construction, buildings, transportation, materials, whatever, is very different from region to region. Also, with the lack of skilled and trained workers in the construction area, that's probably the first reason that it's very difficult to get houses built, and even if the funds are there.
Trying to get to what the size of the gap is and what the investments need to be in order to reduce that gap by 2030 is a key focus and priority for me and for Deputy Fox. We work closely with the IFSD, who does a lot of that modeling work that you're talking about in terms of assessing the size of the gap, not just in housing, but other infrastructure and socioeconomic needs. We know it's significant. AFN has estimated it at $60 billion. I'll turn to Deputy Fox to give some reflections of the work of the department.
Oui, je pense que la seule chose que j'ajouterais.
Well, the only thing I could add to these comments is that in regards to asks on, we have to take a look at transportation, distances, isolation, and of course the pandemic, which has had quite an effect on the cost of labor, for the cost of materials, and we're trying to build that into our forecasts, but the very significant increases. When we base your model on an urban model, we know that this isn't going to fit quite correctly with something that's in an isolated or rural area. Thank you, Madam Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Firstly, welcome to this meeting and for your presentation. I'd like to thank Gil. You talked about housing, which is very important, and you raised some of the questions I had. When it comes to housing with Aboriginal people, it is one of the crises that we have at the moment. I will not raise any questions as they have been covered by colleagues before me. I will ask this question, though. Ever since I joined the Parliament here, I have raised questions about elders and elder care. We value our elders very much, and it hurts us to see Nunavut mute elders go through such a hardship in their lifetime, going through residential school, giving up their children to residential school, forced into settlement communities. Their dogs were destroyed. Many people tell me in the communities that the elders do not want to leave their homeland to get care. I would like to, will you work with the Nunavut government about elder care and to keep the elders in their own homeland when it comes to personal and permanent care?
Your passion for keeping families intact and elders at home. It's not just in Nunavut that I hear this concern. I hear this concern across the country. I even hear this concern from remote and rural communities that are sometimes 4 hours away from an urban center in non-Indigenous communities where elders are isolated from family. And it's tragic because, of course, we know that that connection to family, to culture, to language is actually part of the quality of life that I think we all deserve in our last years. We are working closely with the government of Nunavut. It is the government of Nunavut that has the jurisdiction over healthcare, including long-term and continued care. But we are looking at ways that we can create a strategy together to help build the capacity to have people cared for closer to home, whether that's better at-home care, which I think everybody would say they would prefer to be at home as long as they can, or supportive living in closer to community. We have to do better for our elders. This has been, I think, hopefully one of the eye-openers for all of us during this pandemic, just how much our elders, regardless of where they live in this country, struggle when they're isolated and away from family.
Thank you. I will go to another topic. You wrote that you would get into work on mental wellness. You will work for 3 years. You will set aside $500 million for the next 3 years. The money you have set aside, how much of that is slated towards Aboriginal people? And how much is it going to benefit Aboriginal employees and caregivers?
For Indigenous people, and there is additional monies for non-Indigenous mental health and wellness strategies. But this is an exciting time, actually, because the work that we've been doing with community in partnership with community has really been through the self-determination lens. And so I look at programs like Choose Life in my neck of the woods in Northern Ontario, where Indigenous communities, small communities, and larger tribal council areas were able to develop programming for young people to prevent suicide, to increase mental wellness in communities. And so many people have spoken so highly about this because it's designed by Indigenous people for Indigenous people. That's the intent behind a mental health and wellness strategy that I will be working on with my colleague, Minister Bennett, as mandated by the Prime Minister. It is in my mandate to do this, and I think it has to be through the eyes and lens of Indigenous people. Indigenous people are different, as you know, and be it all across the country. Many Canadians don't know that, I think, as clearly as some others, but I certainly think that there are astounding programs and work being done, back to the land programs, culture and language programs. We often think about mental health, I think, as treatment oriented, like, you have a problem, you go to a counselor. It's a very Western idea of thinking about how to manage mental health. And so it's exciting to see these models growing across the country.
Thank you for clarifying that. I thank you for clarification. Can you give us an estimate exactly how much is targeted towards Aboriginal people? Nunavut Mute have been waiting for years for a treatment center.
Again, and I'm glad that the Minister for Northern Affairs will be here to speak with you because, of course, Nunavut, the province of Nunavut is responsible for healthcare and building those healthcare facilities, but we will work with Nunavut to look at how we can support those kinds of things like treatment centers. I'll say what I say about treatment centers to everyone, though. I come from a family that's experienced substance use problems throughout many generations. And treatment centers are only as good as the desire of the person to go to them. And we have to be thinking broader than treatment centers. There, of course, needs access. We need better access to treatment when people need it. But we also need the kinds of things that make people successful after they leave the treatment center, that helps solidify those gains they make and that recovery they experience while in treatment. Because if people go back to the exact same conditions and the exact same circumstances, relapse is all too far the result. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for the person, and it's heartbreaking for the family. So as much as I know everybody talks about treatment centers, I'm very excited about the prevention piece of our wellness and mental health strategies so that we can prevent people from needing that kind of intensive treatment in the first place.
Thank you, Ms. Laut. We'll go to the second round now. First, Mr. Vidal, you have 5 minutes.
I think it's Shannon, right? Yep.
And then is it Jamie again?
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. I'm going to ask a question, and then I'll go back to Jamie Schmale after. Thanks. Minister, thanks for being here and your officials for joining you today. I'm sure that you know that Métis settlements in Alberta are unique in Canada. They're land-based, they pay taxes, they have elected councils. There are 8 of them in total, and 4 of them are in Lakeland. And of course, we're all well aware that the 2016 Daniels decisions confirmed that Métis people are a federal responsibility. A 2018 infrastructure report highlighted the massive gap that exists between Métis settlements and the rest of rural Alberta, especially on infrastructure. They estimate about 24% of roads, or 216 kilometers, are in very poor condition. The average cost to build a road in Alberta, of course, it varies, but it's anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million a kilometer. And for context, for the entire immediate infrastructure needs of Métis settlements, which the government's also included housing in, you promised $40 million over 40 years. So that would be 1.25 million or 2.5 kilometers per community per year. And that's, of course, only if it's used for roads and not housing or water treatment lagoons or plants, water treatment plants, or any other facilities. I am a fiscal conservative. I believe in governments putting needs before wants and in making careful spending choices, exactly so core needs like infrastructure and housing can be met. So I just wonder how much has been given to the Buffalo Lake, East Prairie, Elizabeth Fishing Lake, Gift Lake, Kikino, Paddle Prairie, and Peavine Métis settlements in Alberta.
So thank you for the question, and thank you for the passion behind it. And I will just say that I hope that you speak to your Albertan colleagues about the importance of creating infrastructure like roads as well, because just as I answered Ms. MP Pulowski, provincial roads are the responsibility of the province. Nonetheless, they can prioritize those and get support from the federal government through the infrastructure projects. And it is important that we consider connecting those remote communities because they do have oftentimes better ability to participate in the economy and to drive their own local economies. In terms of funding for housing in Métis settlements, in fact, I would encourage you to ask that question to Minister Miller. My department focuses only on infrastructure spending in First Nations reserves. And the last thing I'll say is, when we're talking about Métis people having, through a number of different court decisions, been determined to have rights under Section 35 as Indigenous people, it's important not to, in my mind, say that the federal government is responsible for them. And I'll tell you why. All too often, I see the football of who's responsible for Indigenous people. And I will just say that we're all responsible collectively to honor the treaties and to honor the agreements. And so,
as a person of Ojibwe descent, I appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
I certainly don't doubt anyone's sincerity on this file. So I just want to alert to you that those Métis settlements in Alberta have not received a dime, and they're about to miss the second construction season on the $40 million commitment for infrastructure and housing. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much. And I'll make sure to connect with my colleague, Minister Miller, about that. And infrastructure, yes.
Mr. Schmale, you have about a minute and a half.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chair. And Minister, I want to continue on this, the path similar to what Ms. Stubbs was talking about. You had mentioned in your opening remarks the increased funding that your department is looking at specifically in regards to 22 billion for out of court settlements. Maybe you could update this committee to the comments we've heard from some Indigenous leaders who've been waiting for about 6 years or more for compensation. Where is your department in issuing the $40,000 compensation payments, and how far along are you and your department in implementing the new system that will protect Indigenous children?
Well, thank you, MP Schmale. And in fact, Cindy Blackstock began her litigation through the CHRT in 2007. So that's a long time ago. And I'm really proud to be part of a government that has looked for ways to get out of court and to do the right thing by Indigenous people, including to settle long-standing claims and to look for new pathways that will result in less of these litigated solutions. We were really thrilled to get to an agreement in principle at the end of 2021, and the parties are at the table right now working very collaboratively on how to ensure that that money is dispensed to claimants in a way that's fair, transparent, but also safe and respects the people's process to get that money, does not in any way re-victimize or re-traumatize people. We have been obviously, as a government, learning and watching from other individual experience payments, and really know that the way that this unfolds will be critically important to people's mental health. So,
Minister, sorry to cut you off. I only have less than a minute. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We ran out of time there, Mr. Schmale. Sorry about that. Ms. Atwin, you're up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm speaking to you all in the unceded Willistogaig territory here in New Brunswick. Hello to all of my committee members, and thank you, Minister, for being with us today. You're doing a fantastic job, if I can say that right off the cuff here. Here in Fredericton, there is a fastly growing off-reserve and urban Indigenous population, and Friendship Centres play a critical role in supporting this growing community across the country. And I was so grateful to have you visit my riding over the break and to have the opportunity to showcase the incredible work of Under One Sky, the only Friendship Centre in New Brunswick, run by the amazing Patsy McKinney. I have also had the pleasure of regularly meeting with the National Association of Friendship Centre CEO, Jocelyn Forsma. So my question, Minister, is if you could comment on the importance of Friendship Centres and how our government is supporting their critical work moving forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, MP Atwin, and it was such a delight to be in Atlantic Canada. I have to say one of the silver linings of being this minister is getting to meet with Indigenous people from across the country, learning about new cultures like the Lewestokwe and the Mi'kmaq. It's just been a wonderful opportunity for me as a Canadian to understand the many, many different communities and the difference between culture and language across the country. I was delighted to meet with you with the Indigenous Friendship Centre in your community of Fredericton. Patsy and her team were incredibly welcoming. The work they've already done to help Indigenous people, urban Indigenous people, find their paths and either choose to stay in an urban setting or find their way back to community, learn culture and language as appropriate, provide childcare. This is the kind of work that we're really fostering across the country. We have a program that does provide funding to Indigenous Friendship Centres and does provide supports for programs that are run through Indigenous Friendship Centres, because of course we know that Indigenous people, although our program is largely for people on reserve, we know that there's a fluid movement of people between urban centres for school, for services, for work, and then back to First Nations. And so we're going to continue to work with Indigenous Friendship Centres and support their success, because we think it's an important component to indeed Indigenous people all across the country.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And I want to echo what MP Idliot mentioned as far as senior care. It was something really important that we also discussed while you were here. But I know you were kind of cut off when you got to do your opening remarks, and you did mention a little bit about kind of the anti-racism strategy, and I'd particularly like to point to the implementation of Joyce's principle. So I'm just wondering if there's any updates or momentum that you can point to share with the committee, how maybe perhaps the anti-racism strategy is impacting service delivery in the healthcare field for Indigenous peoples across the country.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I will say that I was the Minister of Health when we had the multiple health summits on racism in healthcare. I had an opportunity to listen to Ms. Etchekwan's husband, nobody should have to bear witness to a loved one getting treated like that in a healthcare center, and it happens all too frequently. And so, we are working, as you know, on, and we have plans to create co-developed health legislation with First Nations people so that there is, again, a space where we can ensure that there are tools for First Nations communities that want to, through the spirit of self-determination, provide healthcare services in culturally appropriate ways and in ways that are closer to community. There is examples of that, of course, in BC through the First Nations Health Authority that have been really, really successful. In terms of racism in general, when I was at the FSIN in Saskatchewan, was happy to announce the funding of a position for a health ombudsman that would be able to receive complaints from First Nations people in a safe, also culturally appropriate way, so that people can have confidence that they don't have to experience this kind of racism in their lives without a safe recourse under which they can take action. But those are all just, I think, some of the, I would say, responses that we have underway. I do think it's also some of the things that don't seem as obvious that maybe are connected to racism. For example, working on economic development, ensuring that communities like the many that I visited on the East Coast have the opportunity to create their own source revenue and contribute to their own communities and integrate with community members in a way that maybe looks different than it did even 10 years ago. Ending racism is about the systemic racism that exists in healthcare, in policing, in government. We're going to have to wrap it up, but it's
Minister.
Also about personal relationships.
Thank you, Minister. Madame Gill, 2 minutes et demie.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. En fait,
Thank you, Chair. I would like to add a little clarity to the question I posed earlier to the Minister, and there was a response from that, as to the supplementary costs for the fact that these areas for housing are very isolated. So the question came up in committees. The First Nations themselves have mentioned this. The Inuit in particular were telling us that this was not taken into consideration in their costing. This is why I would repeat the question, if you will, or paraphrase it once more. What would you tell them about this? These are comments that this had not been taken into consideration in the modeling of the construction costs. Well, we do take into consideration isolation and distances when we make our submissions and requests. Of course, construction season is considerably shorter the further north you go, and there is a certain part that is covered by that. And when you say you draw these distinctions, very remotely isolated communities, for example, I'm thinking of a community which is connected by road, in some cases. In other cases, it's waterway only. We can't really bring much materials in by snowmobile, for example. It all depends on which community. There might be 2 or 3 categories. Do you use one model fits all, or do you tailor it for specific communities? When we work with a committee on any given project, our analysis and evaluation, of course, we have to look at how we're going to deliver the materials, and we have to consider labor. This is at this point, we decide if it's going to be airlifted, if it's going to be ice road, or by barge. It's very specific to each project. Yes, but I'm talking from a financial modeling point of view. When you're saying so much is accorded for this particular project, you don't really know until you get to on site. If you need 3 homes in Nunavut, it won't be the same thing as 3 in the Mohawk Reserve near Montreal, for example.
We have to go to Madame Idlaut, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Regarding economic development, I forget what you call that in Inuktitut. You said in your call to action that Aboriginal people have a right to make money, like they should have 5%, and some of the contracts should be awarded to Aboriginal businesses. Have you reached the 5% goal yet to supply Aboriginal services?
Of procurement target overall as the Government of Canada of 5%, and some departments have not reached that 5%, but in our department 9.7% of the materials and services that we procure at Indigenous Services Canada are from Indigenous businesses.
Okay.
Thank you. The 5%. Can you change the 5%? Because we have many people of Aboriginal people, based on pro capita, we have 85% Inuit in the territory of Nunavut. Would you change the 5% to accommodate per capita in Nunavut?
And go up, absolutely. And the target for Indigenous Services Canada next year is 15%. Some departments may struggle depending on what they're buying and what kinds of services they need to acquire. But we have stressed with our colleagues, and maybe I can just let Deputy Fox talk about the work you do with your colleagues to remind people about that target.
Before you respond, if you could also respond, what percent is Nunavut getting? Inuit businesses in Nunavut, how much percentage are they targeted and getting?
Precise number for Nunavut, but just maybe to talk a little bit about the work. So I think what we're trying to do is work with the departments as of April 1st to have a commitment of 5% across the federal system. And that's a minimum of 5%. We will try to increase that. Currently, the spend is about 2%, so we do have 3% to make up in the next year. ISK has a goal of 9.7%, has a current 9.7%. Our goal is 15%. But I would say this, there's also money in the SUPS C, and that's actually targeted to help Indigenous businesses start learning more about how to compete, how to apply, how to be part of that procurement strategy. So not only are we setting the goal, but we're actually funding businesses to be in a position to, be part of that system of procurement in government. And that's the support that the department is giving through Sub-C financing.
Thank you very much. This brings our first panel to a close. Thank you, Minister, for being here with us today. Thank you also, Ms. Fox, Mr. Thompson, and remotely, Ms. Wilkinson. We'll pause now for a few seconds and before we start the second panel.
You have to use the word suspend.
I beg your pardon. We will suspend for a few minutes while we change things over. back to this second panel reviewing Maine estimates. Today we welcome Ministers Vandal, Minister of Northern Affairs, as well as Minister Mark Miller, Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada. Gentlemen, we have an hour with you, and you each have 5 minutes for introductory remarks. I don't know which of you wishes to speak first, but leave that up to you.
I'll begin.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Hello. I'd like to begin by acknowledging we are here on unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I'm here today to discuss and respond to your questions on the 21-22 supplementary estimates and the 22-23 main estimates for Northern Affairs. Joining me today from Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs is Deputy Minister Daniel Kwan Watson, Associate DM Paula Isaac, and Acting ADM Wayne Walsh. CERNAC's Supplementary Estimate C for 21-22 include $20.4 million in funding for Northern Affairs. These funds are critical to advance the work to create more economic opportunities and a higher quality of life in Canada's north. Le nouveau financement pour les affaires du Nord comprend
New finances will be $4.5 million this year in order to establish new marine conservation programs in Canada and more for the territories of the Northwest to support Aurora College, a polytechnical university. A targeted contribution to deal with post-secondary education in the North and to complete our strategic Northern Plan. $7.5 million, of course, is reprofiled in these estimates, unused from prior years, for the Northern Abandoned Mine Reclamation Program. These funds are necessary in order to reduce risks to human health and the environment, as well as the associated financial liability at contaminated sites under federal responsibility, namely the remediation work being done at the Faro mine in Yukon.
$656 million to continue to make progress on a number of priorities, notably climate change, clean energy, environmental protection, and economic development. Climate change poses a threat to all of Canada, but in Canada's north, it is clear that the consequences of climate change are severe. We are therefore requesting $54.8 million for climate change adaptation and clean energy in these estimates, and $16.3 million for Northern and Arctic environmental sustainability. Our government is working with partners to protect the environment while providing economic opportunities through our efforts to clean up contaminated sites in the north. For this, we have requested $339.5 million in the estimates for the northern contaminated sites. The guiding principles for our work in the north and the Arctic is in the co-developed Arctic and Northern Policy Framework. Last December, I met with Indigenous, territorial, and provincial governments for the second framework leadership meeting. To advance implementation of the framework and governance structures, we are seeking $98.3 million for the Northern and Arctic Governance Partnership, $5.9 million for the Strategic and Science Policy Program, and $19.5 million for the Northern Regulatory and Legislative Framework. Tous les Canadiens, peu importe où ils vivent, méritent.
All Canadians, regardless of where they live, deserve access to affordable and nutritious food. Northern Affairs is working closely with other federal departments and our Indigenous partners to identify shared programs in order to identify the problems in northern-based solutions. A long-term strategy requires a whole-of-government approach that recognizes and addresses the key factors of income and employment. I'd further like to recognize the work of the committee on this important topic, and I look forward to continued cooperation.
$121.7 million for this program. Nutrition North Canada has seen a number of improvements, including the addition of several communities to the program and the very successful Harvesters Support Grant, providing funds directly to Indigenous partners for costs associated with traditional hunting and harvesting activities, increasing access to traditional country foods. Thank you very much, and I'd be very pleased to take your questions. Kuyanamik, merci, and thank you.
Merci, Ministre Vandal.
Thank you, Minister Vandal. Mr. Minister Miller, you have the floor.
I want to begin by acknowledging that, as Dan did, that we are together here on the Algonquin and Anishinaabe People Territory as we are here appearing in Ottawa. I'm at the INAN committee today to explain the 2021-2022 supplementary estimates and the 2022-2023 main estimates for Crown Indigenous Relations Canada. And joining me mostly virtually are Daniel Kwan-Watson, Darlene Bess, Martin Réère, and Maria-Louise Capellas. As we look to close out 2021-2022, these supplementary estimates reflect a net increase of $317.9 million, which includes $186.6 in new funding. The new funding will allow us to deliver on key departmental priorities and Indigenous priorities. For example, essential to supporting reconciliation at a fundamental level is $42.2 million in funding for the continued implementation of the residential schools missing children community support funding. I'd hasten to say at the same time that that is only a small snapshot of what has been promised and indeed funded to communities across the country to this date, and be glad to speak to it in more detail should the questions arise. The initiative is key to addressing the ongoing legacy of colonialism and impacts on the residential school system in particular. It supports survivors, families, and communities as they continue to look for their children who never returned home, and also provides support so that they may commemorate, mourn, and heal in the way that they choose. In addition to the supplementary estimates, there is also an inclusive amount of $51.1 million for the Métis Nation housing strategy. And as you're aware from the ongoing study, safe, adequate, and affordable housing provides the foundation for individual families to achieve better health outcomes and socioeconomic outcomes. Alors que nous nous tournons vers le nouvel exercice.
As we look forward to the new fiscal year, 22 and 23, the main estimates will be approximately $5.8 billion. The estimates reflect a net increase of $1.1 billion compared to last year's estimates. We continue to work with Indigenous partners to fully implement the TRC Commission's calls to action. Part of that work includes a national action plan for federal pathway to end the national tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, Two-Spirit and GBLTQ people as well. These measures are supported by $108.8 million in the department's main estimates. These investments will support new shelters and increase the capacity of Indigenous women's organizations to provide services and support new models of community safety. Finally, I want to end by saying a few words about land claims. The amount identified for resolution of specific claims is just over $2.3 billion in the estimates. Resolving land claims, additions to reserve, and treaty settlement agreements are all key in rebuilding trust with Indigenous communities in order to recognize historical injustices and to even them out. We can't rebuild trust, we can't talk about self-determination, and we can't advance reconciliation without addressing the land issue, because land-related issues are one of the main causes of socioeconomic inequalities among First Nations, Inuit, and Métis.
We are throwing money at the problem is often misunderstanding that monetary compensation plays an essential role in restorative and reparatory justice and allows us to move on an equal-to-equal basis. There are many other instruments that I'd be eager to talk to you with the committee, but as we apprehend what may seem in appearance as large sums, are often sums that have been due over sometimes decades and indeed centuries. I appreciate the opportunity to explain the department's spending forecast to you today, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. Miigwech, Kuyanamik, Marcy, thank you, et merci.
Thank you, Minister. We'll proceed with the first round of questions. Mr. Vidal, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, ministers, for being here today. Minister Miller, 16 of the 20 First Nations along the route of the Coastal GasLink pipeline have signed agreements to acquire a 10% equity stake in the project. These communities also have other business partnerships, including project supply chain contracts, mutual benefit agreements, et cetera. And this obviously allows them to invest in thriving communities through investments in culture, sports, health, and education programs, as well as infrastructure. What we're talking about here is an opportunity of a lifetime for long-term generational economic prosperity. But the equity options can only be executed once the pipeline actually is in service. And we've seen extremely violent protests. We've seen rhetoric both on the ground and online by celebrities, by foreign-funded extremities. Or extremists, I'm sorry. I don't see any mention of any of this in the estimates, the department plans, the results. I don't see any discussion around this anywhere, and I'm just curious what the government is doing to ensure this project gets built so that these First Nations can receive the benefits that they rightly deserve from this project.
First, let me say this, MP Vidal, thank you for the question. Violence of any nature is unacceptable in a society such as ours. At the same time, we have to recognize that while this is an entirely provincially regulated authorization process that has gone through all the mechanisms, there is a resistance to this project by several Indigenous groups. Those that have chosen to invest in CGL, that is absolutely their right, and indeed on completion, they most likely stand to benefit from it. The question, I think, is what is the role of the federal government when people are not of the same mind, excluding people that would choose, obviously, violence as a solution to their frustrations. And that is an important one. I don't think there is a cost estimate that we could come up with that would truly value the role that the federal government can play working with the provincial government, in this case, Minister Rankin in BC, in trying to achieve a peaceful solution to a very highly contentious situation, which starts not only in resource extraction, but controversy over the issue of Indigenous title and Wet'suwet'en hereditary title that was embodied in Supreme Court cases a quarter of a century ago. I'm not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that hereditary leadership in this case sanctions any of the unacceptable activities we've seen, but we have to at the same time acknowledge that there is a tension within the Wet'suwet'en people leadership, many of them, as to whether this pipeline has had the social acceptability that it has. It is a difficult situation.
Sorry, Minister, I don't mean to cut you off, but
I'll just conclude in saying that the federal government stands ready to help at any situation to try to bring this to a peaceful solution. Trying to take sides isn't helpful, but trying to resolve this in a peaceful way is.
I want to go down a bit of a similar line or similar type question, but in 2018, your government purchased the Trans Mountain pipeline. It was indicated at the time that you would not be a long-term owner. Following the purchase, Finance Canada began consulting with First Nations leaders about the possible Indigenous ownership, and since then it's been pretty quiet, I must say. And we've seen some emails recently through access to information requests commenting on the What We Heard report that was published back by the government in 2019 show communication staff actually talking about keeping it quiet and that's a little bit discouraging, to be honest with you. But I want to get right to the crux so you have time to answer the question. Can you tell me what the plan is in the context of selling TMX to the interested Indigenous? Like there was a couple different groups interested in buying this pipeline. Where are we at in that journey with those groups?
Yeah, as the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, I don't have a direct role in any sort of brokering of this process. I do have the same information as to the interest of several Indigenous groups that have expressed the desire to get an equity portion in it. And I don't think, short of that, and I obviously just direct you to the Minister of Natural Resources in that case for those types of questions, but I have no particular point of view as to their role in this, and just support any Indigenous peoples that I have the honor of represent in
All right.
in their
Thank
points
you.
of view. Thank you.
I know we're not specific talking about SUP Bs from 2021-22 today, but I want to jump back because we never had the opportunity to talk about those and ask you a quick question. There was $212.2 million to compensate 13,500 individuals. It was the day school survivor settlement. You and I have talked about this in the past. In the SUP B details, it talks about this funding also being used for legal fees, third-party administration costs, and ongoing management of Indigenous childhood claims litigation. I'm just wondering if you could provide to me the breakdown of how much of that $212 million is for the legal fees and the admin costs and all of the, and if you don't have that or your people don't have it, if you could provide that to us in writing at some point.
Yeah, I will provide that to you in writing. I don't have that today.
Yeah, thank you. I got 30 seconds. I'm going to ask you a couple real quick hitters here if I can. I had the opportunity to meet with a number of your department officials back a while ago. They gave me a briefing, and that was fantastic. I appreciate that. In that discussion, and along with some other information that we've been able to kind of talk about after that, there's some really long time frames on the settlement of the ATRs and the specific land claims, and the time frames are actually almost unfathomable at times. And I'm curious to what you think is an appropriate standard, and if there's some specific measures you could talk about that your department's working on to shorten those claim periods and settlements.
Yeah, and they are complex. The timelines are unacceptable at times, even in the simpler cases. And so, the approach I've tried to take as a minister is as quickly as possible, with the frustrating realization that can't come to fruition in a lot of cases. There are, in the ATR process, some third-party interests that we need to clear and satisfy before that process is complete. There have been the process of ATR is complexified even further by the fact that it falls within Minister Hajdu and my authorities jointly. But at the end of the day, the conclusion is that it has been too slow. It needs to go quicker, and we need to be a little more innovative as to how we add land back to reserves. And it's very, very frustrating for communities that are looking to, even if it's a couple acres, but in some cases, it should be even in the simplest of cases, much faster. There are more monies allocated internally, a few $1 million to hasten that. But as we exit from COVID, as people actually go back to work, and in-person paper documentation that was essential to getting this done faster can be done a little more effectively, I hope to see that go quicker.
Thank you, Mr. Vidal. Mr. Weiler, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ministers Miller and Vandal and officials for joining our committee for estimates today. My first question through you, Mr. Chair, is for Minister Miller. The main estimates for the upcoming fiscal year include $1.2 billion in funding to implement comprehensive land claims, self-government agreements, and other agreements to address Section 35 rights. How does this funding relate to your commitment to land back that you stated when you were first appointed as Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations?
In part, Patrick, it ties directly into that comment. I think the comment that I made is one that is important for someone in my position and the positions that we all hold to realize is the reality of our history, which is our relationship is based in land and has been broken by, at times, the theft of land, dispossession of land through other means. And the injustice that created and the corresponding legal remedies that are being exercised today in court, more often than not, the facts are not in Canada's favor. And that has resulted in very large monetary compensations. The amounts that you see in the estimates are ones that are coming to fruition. Out of respect for the communities in question, one of which is in Alberta, there are a few very large ones on the horizon, and thanks to the engagement of the community foremost in getting that done. Often there are situations where land cannot be restored because there are people on it, and despite what you've often heard about things, there is a desire by Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities to get along, and some very good partnerships. No one's asking anyone to go anywhere, but people are just asking to get along and to achieve justice. That includes restoration of land, and where that is not possible, monetary funds to the extent that can substitute it adequately. So as I look to my department for more innovative solutions, including direct negotiations with provinces for better access to lands on treaty land entitlement basis, mostly in the prairies, this is work that needs to continue, but to the extent that we can't replace with land or where that's not desirable, the compensation through monetary, as I mentioned in my introductory comments, reparations and restorative justice.
Thank you. And maybe continuing on this line, many First Nations across BC have completely given up on the modern treaty process just because of the astronomical cost in legal fees and the many decades that it's been taking to come to resolutions. And ironically, it's actually made pathways through the court much more attractive. But at the same time, we've seen the provincial government in BC move relatively swiftly to conclude comprehensive foundation agreements with several First Nations, including one in my riding. In the departmental plan, it says that it will accelerate the renewal of the relationship with Indigenous peoples by increasing the number of treaties, self-government agreements, and other constructive agreements, using an approach based on the affirmation of rights and by reform of policies to ensure that they align with partner expectations. And there's a combined almost $450 million in these estimates in support of treaty negotiations, both past and present. So I was hoping you could explain to this committee at this point if the ministry is faced with a lack of resources for these negotiations, and or what the ministry plans to do to speed up some of the relatively glacial pace of the self-government negotiations and other constructive arrangements with First Nations.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I think it calls into question some of the principles we've stated quite clearly as a government about renewing our relationship and working on a nation-to-nation basis, going at the pace of the communities, and sort of the square approach that we have at times been accused, rightly so, of taking with respect to communities that want a little rounder solution. Ironically, even more so, to your comments, Patrick, where we've had successes more often than not has been in the West, with a few notable exceptions where I come from. But the pace is slow. I don't think we can deny that. There is there's a multi-governmental approach that needs to be taken when we talk about fisheries or defense or natural resources, provincial government involvement. These are all elements that do slow down the pace. Clearly, the resources that we've allocated in the last 5 years have been significant. We have hundreds of negotiation tables of various natures, whether they're sectoral or not. The modern treaty process is a slow process, but I think we have to realize as a country that what we have as a set of tools needs to be expanded for communities that just refuse as a starter to get into those discussions, and it forces those communities into the devil they know, which is the Indian Act, and that is an absolutely unacceptable proposition to hear in this day and age. So, internally reflecting on it, we've got to get smarter about what we're doing. There are some great. I think about the sea shelf in your riding, Patrick, and that there is some good news on the horizon there, hopefully. But obviously, the pace isn't at the pace that we would hold ourselves to, and indeed the communities and nations expect us to move at. You get into treaty areas in the prairies, you get into rather numbered treaty areas, you get into peace and friendship treaties in my neck of the woods, and the relationship gets much more complex. So there's a lot of work to do, and it's stuff that we have to be open-eyed about. But clearly the resources that we are now deploying, particularly coming out of 2 years of pandemic, are such that we feel we can make some significant progress. But I think people are expecting more results quicker, and I don't object to that point.
Thank you, Mr. Weiler. Madame Gill, vous avez 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the Ministers Miller and Vandal for their compassion today, and all the other teams, of course, who are here virtually today. My first question is on the budget, of course. Sub-C's contribution to the consultations on policy. We see the columns there, and they're very important sums here, but in this case, what we have, 12 million, and then we'll be adding 95 million for whatever it comes to 108 point something million. Why this change? It stands. It's quite glaring differently on the page. Thank you, Deputy MP Gill, I'll give a comprehensive chance to my officials who are online for a better answer. Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to find the budgetary line here. And I'm sure that I'm getting some help. I'm looking for that specific number that was mentioned. Well, I can go with another question while waiting for this answer, and if you can answer me later, that's fine. I'd like to move on to a totally different subject, that of residential schools. It's of concern to all First Nations. They're all caught up in this situation, compensation, but time goes by, and some of these recipients may not be around. Minister Miller, we were discussing it with you last December. You spoke of a ministerial process, perhaps, to get a hold of those archives. This willing to go ahead is reflected here in the budget, of course, but I'd like to know what's been going on and what's happened, progress since December last. Yes, there's a lot of unease with the exposure and disclosure of some of this information in the archives. It's very important to have the information, but it's quite delicate. We haven't been up to perhaps our standards are for this disclosure, but at the directive of the Prime Minister, I reviewed the documentation with my team, which some of which are under the stamp of privileged information or the secret of the confessional in some cases. And we have to make sure that we don't disclose documents that we shouldn't. So we're looking at this with the Center for Truth and Reconciliation in Winnipeg. We're establishing much better communications here. In some cases, the documents are not reliable in any case. So we're talking thousands of documents here. And this is not apparently the entire sum of what we have to do. I don't want to interrupt you, but time runs out. No, I could speak about it all day long, but I'd be happy to listen to you. But for budgetary purposes here, the work that still has to be done needs to have a dedicated budget. And you received your mandate letter at about the same time, I believe. What other measures can be found in the supplementary budgets? No, well, not right now, not currently. But it doesn't represent the extent of the needs that are there. The committee must express that there's going to be more expenses on this matter for external and internal source research. Well, thank you. I'm thinking of all the First Nations that are involved here, and I understand that you're being very empathetic and compassionate. But there's a number of survivors for whom the time is running out, literally. So they would very much like to get some closure from the past. I'm looking at the supplementary here, and you're taking a look about $40 million for subsidies to the call to action, numbers 72 and 76. There was a 38 odd million, and I think you're re-announcing $7 million here. How are you going to ensure that the amounts involved here be more easily accessible so that First Nations can take advantage of the situation? Well, to give you a more complete, not a totally complete, engagements that have been made. $78 million has been engaged with Indigenous communities for research locally, and there are communities as well. This excludes the sums that have been set aside for Indigenous Services Canada and Heritage Canada But to give you a full picture, you have to look at the engagements that were done prior to the election, about $320 million. And, well, the demand will be higher than that, but we're prepared for that. Can you give us something in writing after this? Well, we're working on such a report right now. Some of this money has been disbursed very, very recently, and we're catching up on the bookwork. We'll give you a breakdown later. Thank you, Madame Gill. Before going to MP Idlote, did you find a number for Ms. Gill? Well, I think perhaps I found the right budget line, but let's ensure that I'd like to reply in writing if we can, just to make sure that we've got the right point. We want to be absolutely sure. That's fine. That is acceptable. Deputy Idlote.
Thank you.
Silaw asidjuk padlianingan ni ukaw sa kaklutiglo amaro sa lumayunik makotinik ukaw sa kakamigabit sa nagvayse mayo.
You mentioned climate change and clean energy. And I am sure that you are well aware that all of Nunavut communities use diesel fuel. I'm asking you, how much of the investments you mentioned will go towards a transition of renewable energy in Nunavut?
Who is that?
Vandal, you.
Mr. Vandal.
Thank you for that important question. We do know that climate change is very real. We know that the effects of climate change are more drastic in the north than the south. And in our funding, we realize that we have to do a better job of bringing green energy to the north, all the territories, but as well as Nunavut. We have, through programs like Northern Reach, Climate Change Preparedness for the North, and Indigenous community-based climate monitoring. Our government is partnering with Indigenous nations to address climate change that work in their communities. I've been to Rankin Inlet, and I've seen a very creative program that has elders working with young people to monitor the ice levels as a way to share the knowledge and the information with the local community. And I'm also working very closely with the Kivalliq Corporation that are working on the Kivalliq fiber optic hydroelectricity line to bring hydro up from Manitoba Hydro, northern Manitoba, all the way up to the Kivalliq region so that they can get off diesel. And that's something that through the Infrastructure Bank is now involved, as well as CanNor have supported that in the past. There's going to be some very exciting announcements into the future. But as a policy, as you know, we want to be net zero by 2050. That means some very aggressive initiatives all over Canada, but also the north. And as a policy, we want to remove all of the diesel that's being used in the north with alternative, greener, more sustainable forms of energy. If you want specific dollar figures, I would turn it to maybe Daniel Kwan, or the Deputy Minister, or the Associate Deputy Minister, to find very specific numbers.
Is he on?
Yeah. Can I turn it to the DM or the ADM with dollar figures?
Oh, go ahead.
I don't have specific numbers with me right now, but we can certainly follow up in writing for the figures for the programs that the minister just mentioned that are supporting these projects to transition to clean energy.
Okay.
Thank you. Also, if you could, how much you are setting aside that energy. The power plants are very old in Nunavut. They need to be refurbished or new ones built altogether. How much have you budgeted for upgrading and updating the power plants in Nunavut?
Thank you for that very important question. I have found a number on protecting the environment. Just to go back, it's $55 million for climate change adaptation and clean energy, which is an increase of $20 million, but we realize that's simply Northern Affairs. There are other government departments, including Environment, NRCan, and we're taking a whole of government approach to the whole effect of the whole issue of climate change and green energy, where there's many more hundreds of millions of dollars that will be invested in Canada, and to actually pinpoint it to the north, we'd have to get you that information at a later time.
One more question regarding oil tanks and power plants. Our very old infrastructure. When do you have any idea when you plan to upgrade those, and how much have you budgeted for those upgrades? Thank you.
Excellent question. Excellent question once again. We know that infrastructure in all parts of Canada are very old. I would imagine in the north and the Arctic they're equally old, and that is something that's a priority, not only for Northern Affairs and CERNAC and Indigenous Services, but we are taking a whole of government approach to that. And again, for specific numbers, we would have to get back to you at a later date.
Thank you, Mr. One quick question about Nutrition North. The communities in Nunavut keep telling me that the foods they arrive through Nutrition North, which are supposed to be nutritious and healthy, arrive expired. What we are now doing is wasting money on cargo rates. By the time the nutritious food arrive, those products have expired. How will this department take care of making sure that nutritious food is getting to Nunavut, not expired, and it's a waste of money paying cargo for nothing?
I'm not hearing the translation at this point.
Okay, I will try again. I will try again.
We'll answer that in the second round, which we now proceed to, and we'll start with Mr. Shields. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll be sharing my time with Mr. Vidal. Mr. Miller, you're very familiar with Siksika Nation, and it's very specific. They have a very long single road bridge over the Bow River, which is dangerous and an impediment to economic development. Chief Ori Crowfoot is working with the surrounding municipalities. They're working with the province, but as you know, this kind of build would take financial money from infrastructure. What I'm asking is I bring that information to the Minister for Infrastructure federally. Would you support that with influence at the table for that project?
Yeah, and thanks for the question. And I have a pretty decent relationship with Chief Crowfoot, and so I have actually yet to talk to him specifically on that issue. And should he advocate that I do so, I'd gladly do so and advocate towards the Minister of Infrastructure for that investment. These projects, depending, have to be advanced by the province, and if they have an Indigenous component, there's actually a ratchet up of the federal involvement, as you know, and sometimes they come from other sources, but I have no problem.
And this project is large enough, it'll come to the federal side, as you will realize, for infrastructure.
I understand that when it gets large, it gets federal, yeah.
Right, so I appreciate your support, as I will bring you that information as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Turn my time to Mr. Vidal. Thank you. Mr. Miller, the PBO in his report on the fall economic update had some pretty scathing statements to make about the timeliness and lack of transparency on the release of the public accounts and the annual financial report. Now, it's my understanding that reopening and some of the stuff that happened around that I'm trying not to get into a bunch of accounting lingo here on you, but that happened around the $40 billion settlement that was going on at the time, and that's kind of what triggered a lot of this. So I get the connection, but what I'm wondering is that if you can tell the committee what it was about the agreements and the timing that forced you to in an unprecedented way reopen public accounts that were already signed off on. They were done, they were finished. They eventually got tabled later than they had since 1994. And as I said, they had to be reopened. And ultimately what happened is there was just about $10 billion that got backdated back into the accounts for 2021 already. So and the PBO makes it very clear that this was a government decision. I mean, in his report, he says the government's decision to amend the initial public accounts. As somebody that sits at the cabinet table, can you tell how that played out and what forced you to have to do that?
I never had any discussion of the sort, so I'd have to defer to whoever took that decision. I don't know. Are you suggesting that the PBO said that it had to do with the agreements in principle that were concluded on December 31st?
Well, yeah, it did. If you follow through the notes to the financial statements and the subsequent event notes,
I'll confess
it was directly connected to that.
I haven't read it, but
in essence, what it looks like, Minister, is and that's the frustration. It looks like, in essence, what happened is these accounts got open so that we could take $10 billion of the $40 billion and put it back in last year when there was already a $327 billion deficit and not have to account for it going forward. That's the appearance of it, it might be legal, but it sometimes we're putting our toes on the edge of, and it doesn't seem transparent in my mind. I guess that's my concern.
When we look at Indigenous liability and we look to account fairly, there are many large items that I would like to track back fiscally to the 1800s, and in this case, track them back to 1990. We're talking about $40 billion, $20 billion in making sure we don't continue the discrimination that has heretofore occurred, and $20 billion to settle liability that's gone in various areas back to the 1990s. So if I could attribute it to prior governments, I would love to do it. But I know that is not a proper accounting mechanism, but it's probably a fair one to do if you look at it from.
Minister, I'm not talking about the amounts. I'm talking about the process.
I wouldn't know. It
was unprecedented process. So, just maybe one quick follow-up question, because I am going to run out of time, I'm sure, pretty quickly here, Mr. Chair. As Minister Hajdu talked about the whole $40 billion child welfare settlement, it was two $20 billion pieces. You and I have had this conversation. In essence, what's happened, if I understand it correctly, is the departments have tasked the FN with going out and collecting the data to try to get these agreements in principle to a finalized point by March 31st, 2022. Now, that's what the aim was, right? I'm hearing some concerns that First Nations that are not part of the AFN are upset about the process because they feel like they're being excluded. The minister earlier in the first session talked about fair and collaboratively working towards this. Are you hearing that same concern, or is that just something I'm hearing through other sources? I'm just curious if you're hearing that same issue and how you're addressing it, if you are.
Yeah, and it's, ultimately it won't be me that addresses it, it'll be the court. And what we're talking about is two separate items. One, historical compensation, which is largely driven through, while imperfect, a well-acknowledged process to achieve redress of grievance, which is a class action. But when we're talking about long-term reform...
Yeah, but my point, Minister, is about the process and engaging the First Nations. You set out to engage First Nations to come to an agreement by March 31st. I'm not arguing about the components. I'm talking about the process. Has there been concern about the process from non-AFN member First Nations?
I think you'll always find concern with the process, and you will find concern with the process from people that don't consider AFN to speak for them. And when it comes to children and their families, it can be a very sensitive issue. You compound that by the fact that you're talking about historical amounts that, yes, while they're an attempt to take away the discrimination that's occurred. We're talking about large amounts that will impact communities and will impact individuals. I'm confident that the process is equitable, but certainly those concerns are there. I have a lot of faith in the advocacy of Dr. Blackstock. She has not been afraid to speak up for children, regardless of who that impacts, any level of leadership, foremost the federal government. But it is a concern, obviously, and I'm sure it's a concern for AFN.
Thank you, Mr. Vidal. Mr. McLeod, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both ministers for presenting today. There's lots of interesting discussion happening. I want to make first a comment to Minister Vandal about Nutrition North. In the Northwest Territories, I think we have 10 communities on Nutrition North program. We don't want to be on that program. But in order for us to get off the Nutrition North program, we need a solution. And the solution is in the government's hands, because in the Northwest Territories, the federal government is still responsible for building new roads. So if you took the opportunity and found the investment to build the roads to these communities, we would need the growing subsidy. You know, when I got involved with the government many years ago, it was only around 20 million. We're well over $100 million a year now. So that's a suggestion, and I keep reminding you of it. To Minister Miller, I belong to the Deitcho First Nations, and I started attending meetings when I was 17 years old. And I was talking about recreation facilities and sports programs. Elders were talking about land claims. I'm now 62 years old, and we're still talking about land claims and self-government for the people of my tribal council. And things were not moving very fast. And in 2014, it got even worse because the Conservative government cut funding to band councils, to core funding, to tribal councils, and they also cut the resources to the department. So just before COVID hit, I talked to a small community that's negotiating in the Northwest Territories, Colville Lake. We have 14 tables going on in Northwest Territories. So the chief said, in the Northwest Territories, when negotiators come, they leave Ottawa Monday morning. They fly all day to get to Yellowknife. After 12 hours, they overnight in Yellowknife. Next day, they catch the flight, the commercial flight to Norman Wells, and they stay there for another night. Wednesday morning, they charter a plane into Colville Lake, get settled into their room, and we start negotiations Wednesday afternoon. We do introductions, set the agenda. Thursday morning, we start negotiating. Noon, we start packing up so that the negotiators can head back to Ottawa. They fly to Yellowknife Thursday night. Friday, they head all the way back to Ottawa. Half a day, once a month. And it's not improving. And at this rate, we're not going to settle in the land claims. I've been here 6.5 years. We haven't signed one land claim in the Northwest Territories. And it's not the Indigenous government's fault. It's the federal government's fault. They don't have the investment and resources to do a good job. There's negotiators with more files than they can handle. Is there a solution that you can suggest? Is there a strategy that you're working on to try to improve the ability for the federal government to take part in the negotiations, to speed it up? At this rate, I'm 62 now. I'm not going to see an AIP in my lifetime in the part of the country that I live in.
It's it's probably cold comfort to you to hear that we can reproduce that same negotiation strategy and only travel half an hour. So it's not exactly, I understand that, what you're trying to exemplify is the immense cost and resources that you deploy in actually getting people from A to B in the far north, and the impact and what would appear to be disrespectful to just sit there for a half hour or half a day and then it's in and out strategy. I don't like making this a partisan thing. It doesn't make me blind to the cuts that occurred in the past, but I think when we talk about reconciliation, there's still a segment of our society that wants it, but thinks it has to be done for free. And when people look at the amounts that we're investing into things, and whether we're talking about, just a over $1 billion of loans that had to be forgiven or were removed from the books for Indigenous communities that had to fight in court for their claims, legitimate claims. That stuff we've been able to move on to clear the playing field. So we're starting on an equal basis. And I know it's frustrating to hear that these things are slow and nothing's going to happen. I still have hope. I would have to fire myself if I said I didn't have hope. But the reality is that we spent a lot of time co-developing fiscal policies that will make a huge difference in leveling the playing field, allow communities to lift themselves up in the spirit of self-determination. There are many tools that are allowing us to work with communities, support them in their self-governance efforts as they work towards a nation-to-nation basis, which has to be an equal-to-equal basis. We know the conditions on which we imposed Indigenous communities to get them to sign treaty, for example, to sign agreements in the past. It's why we call the ones that we feel are more progressive modern treaties, because they're more egalitarian and fair in nature. There's work to do with them as well. But I think the pace of things is well registered within this government. We've been around for 6 years. 19 self-government agreements. There's more to come. Land is a proposition, and you would say that in the far north, where there's so much of it, it should be a no-brainer. It still gets complicated.
Your answer is important, but we do have to wrap up.
So I don't disagree with MP McLeod. We've, as you know, we've deployed a tremendous amount of money to get there. There are some breakthroughs in the north coming. I hope to see them in the next year or two fiscally. But again, I don't like to make promises I can't keep. But you do know, because I brief you often, we're making the effort.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. Madame Gill, 2 minutes et demie.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. I have a further question. The UNDRIP Declaration on Indigenous Rights, of course, it has been adopted this year in Canada here, and I'm very, very pleased on behalf of the Indigenous nations. In Supplementary C, there's $11 million that has been added or designated to implement the UNDRIP. What is this $11 million? How is it going to be implemented? How is this going to help us to implement the actual functional integration of the UNDRIP declaration? Well, the royal sanction was a very significant incident, and of course the implementation is even more important. It's a very complex process. We must consult all the First Nations and communities. It's going to be spread over the next 2 fiscal years, if I'm not mistaken. That's the commitment. What the $1 million, the 11 million? No idea. Well, anytime you have details, let us know. I would like to follow up on the progress. I imagine that's my 2.5 minutes, Chair. No, you give you another. Whoa, okay. Wow, I'm not usually a fast talker. The minister's answer was very efficient. Well, I have further questions on these unmarked graves. Certain engagements have been made, but the communities want to know if they can get a share of this and how go about it. I would have liked to know where we are at. What's being done with this $27 million? Has part of it been dispersed? Or do we need more money? Well, yes, we'll probably have to top it off. It's a very significant amount of money. Nonetheless, the importance of the task for those who have been traumatized by this is well worth the cost. Multiple departments are involved: Heritage Canada, Indigenous Services Canada, Mental Health Supports, Health Canada. There's a lot of different initiatives, depending on what the community wants to do. If they want to enter, disinter, it'll all go at various speeds as well, depending on the capacities of each of the communities. And of course, there are some people that are almost considered third parties because they weren't living on the reserves at the time, day school students. Many communities are involved in research on how to go about this. Thank you, Madam Gill. Ms.
Kiyo Lokaklanga.
And nutritious food for Canadians, young people, and elders and seniors. First of all, let me say that I'm very pleased that in the main estimates that are before you today, there's $121.7 million for Nutrition North. And through Budget 21, we also expanded the Nutrition North program with an additional $163.5 million for funding, which was done in collaboration with Indigenous partners to address food insecurity in the North. The issue of food insecurity is a long-standing issue. It's not going to be solved by one program. It's got to involve a whole-of-government approach. It's got to involve territorial governments, Indigenous governments, the business sector, the nonprofit sector to look for solutions, creative solutions, and innovation. We're very proud of the Harvester Support Grant, which we co-developed with Indigenous nations about a year and a half ago, and over the last year alone, there was over 5,500 harvesters, over 150 hunts, and over 120 food sharing initiatives that were supported by the Harvester Support Grant. Now, to more directly answer your question on food being out of date, I think that's not acceptable. I can follow up with you after this meeting and with the public service to get more detail so that we can get you a more precise answer. But I do know that we have a Nutrition North Advisory Committee. We are constantly consulting on how we make the program better. I'll be the first to admit that it's very good, but there's always room for improvement. So we will talk.
Thank you so much. Percent of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action have now been implemented or are well underway. Yet in December 2021, researchers from the Yellowhead Institute concluded that only 11 of the calls to action have been implemented. Can the minister explain why 80% of the work is done when Indigenous communities continue to experience little change? And secondly, can the minister explain why there's this disconnect?
Yeah, and I don't, when you talk about 80% underway, I think it depends on the actual call, and the ones that are completed sometimes are ones that perhaps are a little more finite in time. I wouldn't say any of them are particularly easy to do, but when we're talking about completion and underway, there's a difference, obviously, and I don't contest the Yellowhead Institute's numbers. Their approach was quite clear. I don't think anyone of us in the federal government should be walking around sort of sticking our chest out saying how proud we are to have accomplished. This is our duty and we have to get it done. I'm hopeful that there are a number that will be complete in the next quarter, and that's very important, I think, first and foremost to those that called on us to complete these calls to action. It's been slow for a number of reasons. I don't think any excuse would be satisfactory to committee members. But there are amounts that are dedicated to fulfilling these calls to action. The calls 72 to 76 will go at the pace of the communities. Those are not complete, but they are ones that have to be done out of respect for those community members. I'd use this opportunity as well to highlight that in the documents presented today, there's over $25 million for the Quiktini Truth and Reconciliation Report implementation sums that were requested, and I think that's very hopeful for particularly the people that you represent. But again, I think we have to look at these calls in a comprehensive way and give Canadians a sense of what we're actually doing and what needs to be completed, and frankly, where we're failing. And that's what I hope to bring as part of a minister to this difficult task, and it's something I think we would expect from any minister of the Crown.
Thank you so much for.
Thank you, Ms. Idlout. That brings this panel to an end. I'd like to thank both Ministers Miller and Vandal for coming to answer our questions today. Committee members, we have one last task to do just before we go. Hopefully it'll go quickly. We have to look at the votes in the main estimates, and we have two choices. We can look at each vote one at a time, or we can look at all of them together. Let me ask the question, do I have unanimous consent to vote the main estimates in one motion, or do you want to break it out into individual votes? One motion?
I'm fine with one motion, Chair, on division.
Very good. Madame Gill, oui, Ms. Idlout?
Angyak po nga. Yes.
Thank you. I don't have my earpiece in, sorry. So let me officially put it forward, and it reads as follows. Shall vote 1 under the Canadian High Arctic Research Station, votes 1, 5, 10, and L15 under the Department of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, and votes 1 and 5 under the Department of Indigenous Services, less the amounts voted in the interim supply, carry.
On division.
On division. Thank you. Shall I report the main estimates for 2022-2023, less the amounts voted in the interim supply to the House? Agreed?
On division.
Copy on division. Thank you very much. Just before you leave, just a reminder that next week we will be continuing with on Tuesday with the housing study. On Friday, we will be looking at the report from the first study, and the clerk has informed me that she's sent out the reports to you today, so we have a week to study it. Just a reminder that we're looking for prioritized lists for the non-insured health benefits study by the 1st of April. And we will also, the following week, have meetings on Tuesday the 5th and Friday the 8th, which will continue our housing study, all this before the Easter break. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. This meeting is adjourned.